I'm just like an air traffic controller at this point, trying to get more voices in and say, here, what do you want to show? And work out how to show it and connect people. You want to know how to do that? We know how. Start through an improvisational process of dance and film, trying to tell the story of how you're processing this era. I love mentoring and talking to dancers and young people and anybody and seeing that little eureka moment, because you can really see it, where they go like, oh my gosh, poof, my mind just opened. I have a new idea. Working with the filmmakers to have them just make something so you have a show. They did show me. They're like, well, what do you think? What do you think? Well, I said, they're beautiful. And I cried.
Welcome to Angel City Culture Quest, where art, social justice, and the environment meet in Los Angeles. I am your host, Melina Paris, and I welcome you to this episode. Hi folks, this is your host, Melina Paris. For several months, we have been bringing you inspiring guests along with stimulating content about their work. As with anything, there are costs to keep this podcast going. So if you're able, I would deeply appreciate a donation of any size, even as little as $4 a month. This will help contribute to my ability to continue bringing you the great work of these artists and others and the cultural content that you want to hear about. I would be honored to have your support. To donate, please go to my Patreon link at patreon.com, Angel City Culture Quest. There, you can also see all of our past episodes. Thank you. Hello, and welcome to Angel City Culture Quest. Today, we are bringing you exciting news in dance film. World-renowned Dance Camera West Dance Film Festival in January is celebrating its 20th season, presenting live and virtual screenings throughout the month. And today, we're talking with Kelly Hargraves, the executive and artistic director of Dance Camera West. Hello, Kelly. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you. First up, I want to bring some important information on the Dance Camera West Film Festival schedule, and I want to let listeners know that they can go to our show notes for more details, links to purchase tickets, and some fabulous trailers. Since 2001, Dance Camera West has screened top dance films. Continuing its legacy, the 20th anniversary season will include the Los Angeles premiere of 75 films, showing experimental shorts, animation, and feature docs, which were selected from over a record 400 submissions from around the world. Over 6 days, 11 distinct programs will represent more than 40 countries and feature another record number of U.S. and Los Angeles-based artists making their U.S. and world premieres. The festival will happen at live in-person events at 2 Los Angeles performance and film venues. Dance Camera West once again partners with Theater Raymond Cabaz, January 6th to 8th, to present 3 evenings of international films. And this will include artist Q&As with filmmakers, producers, dancers, choreographers, and festival directors. And on January 13th to 15th, Dance Camera West will bring its closing weekend to the newly founded 2220 Arts and Archives, formerly the Bootleg Theater. Throughout the day, on the 15th, you can see installations and pop-up performances by festival participants throughout the 2220 Arts and Venue space, and each evening includes a DJ after-party in the lounge. Kelly is a creator and curator of dance films. She has a master's in dance film from New York University with a concentration in dance and film history. She danced independently in Montreal and New York and was a member of PoMo CoMo, or Postmodern Commotion, an artist and scientist collection. Kelly has directed several dance films that are shown internationally. She has traveled as a guest lecturer, panel speaker, and jury member at universities in Canada and the U.S. Kelly has been a board member of the Silver Lake Film Festival and the Downtown Los Angeles Film Festival. She has been a dance reviewer for I Spy LA, Dance Insider, Ballet Tons International, Dance on Camera News, and DanceOnline.com, among others. Most importantly, Kelly makes dance films and shows them around the world. Kelly is one of the original co-founders of Dance Camera West, along with a 30-member selection committee made up of members of LA's diverse dance community who represent a broad range of identities. And since 2001, Dance Camera West has connected diverse communities and environments with one of the most extensive eclectic festivals. The festival not only brings thousands of challenging and provocative films to Los Angeles, it bridges the gap between LA film and dance communities. Being a fan of dance, that film and dance gap has always seemed like such an obvious void, especially in LA. So it's great to see that this dance film festival is addressing that. And Kelly, you said when Dance Camera West started making dance film festivals in LA, nobody was making them here, right?
Yeah, that's true. The art form wasn't very developed outside of New York in the U.S. There's a festival called Dance on Camera that started in the 50s, where I worked when I lived in New York and was going to school. So when I moved out here, like as you said, it seemed obvious to me that this was a place where people would appreciate this hybrid form because of the film industry and the dance industry as well. I don't like calling it the dance industry, the dance world that was here. So we were the first one in LA it was actually 21 years ago that we started, but this is our 20th screening. And the point was to show these films to dancers and to audiences so that they could see the possibilities with combining the two. There was a lot of funding for this in Canada, where I'm from, and in Europe. So the most expansive, I guess, quote unquote, best films were from those places.
And the films are from all over the place. This year, Dance Camera West includes new works from France, Australia, Canada, Spain, the UK, Colombia, Italy, Greece, Turkey, the Netherlands, and the Czech Republic. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And what's also noteworthy is this year you said most, or at least half of the films you're screening are made by Americans. And also it's not as international this year, probably due to COVID.
Well, as you said, we had 400 submissions. So the submissions were just as international as ever. In the year before, I think our record was 300. The year before that, it was 200. But due to COVID, there were a lot more films made. And what's refreshing is that the Americans have, I don't know what the word is, but they're representing. There are a lot of really great films coming from American artists this year, and especially Los Angeles artists. I think that has to do with COVID, that people weren't on stages, so they were home still wanting to make work, translating work that was meant for stage, which is great because it gives it more of a choreographic background. You know, the piece has already been thought out, and then you translate it to film. So that's a nice way to go about making a dance film. Whereas the other way is to just sort of start at the same time, which is what I do actually, like start through an improvisational process of dance and film and see where you end up. But yeah, either way, people were willing to play around this year because they had the time and I would say the lack of space. They weren't in studios, they weren't on stages, so their spaces were personal and more visual, more virtual.
Yeah, it made it almost a whole nother extension of creativity.
Yeah, for sure.
Wonderful.
And the stories became sometimes more introspective because you're not sort of just trying to show what a great dancer you are on stage, you know, you're sort of trying to tell the story of how you're processing this era that we're all living through and what that looks like in your body and in your home. You know, there are a lot of films where people start in their bed or start in their mirror looking at themselves and saying, where am I right now? What's that look like?
Very personal.
Yeah.
That's great. Now, this was a last minute sort of entry, but can you talk a little bit about a special edition on the 14th?
Yeah. Undanced Dances Through Prison Walls During Pandemic is definitely one of those programs that had to reinvent itself. It's a program that started years ago where choreographers work with incarcerated youth and make dances. And usually they're in the prisons or detention centers and doing these works live. But because, of course, that couldn't happen during COVID, they decided to make them films. It's a kind of project that just is so important that we're happy to find space for it. It says it's a 37-minute film, but it's 6 different films put together, and they need to sort of be seen as a suite, not sort of just peppered throughout programs. And the other great thing is that they've never been seen in person. They've streamed them for the formerly incarcerated and the incarcerated artists and had sort of Zoom talks. but they haven't all been in the same space. So that should be pretty special. We have that time and space for them to come and see their work as artists in an artistic setting with an audience, just in their, whatever the workshop space was like. I don't know what it was like, but I don't know. They're pretty happy that they get to do it, and we're really happy to have time and space for it.
It's a very important thing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what I like about being in the position I am right now with this festival, because so many people are making films and because so many people have discovered it as an art form more recently than maybe I did. Some of us have been talking about this for 25 years and nobody cared. And now you kind of have to. I really appreciate being in a position to bring it all together in one space. And that's why we show so many films. Because that's kind of crazy. And I wake up in the middle of the night going, why am I doing this? Why am I not just showing the top 10 or the top? Last year we were only able to show, like 16 to 20 films. So we had to limit what we selected. So this year I'm kind of having a blowout. The venue we have has been very generous in giving us the whole building for 3 days at 2220 Arts and Archives. So we're just going to fill it and hope people just hang out and talk. There have been collaborations that come out of filmmakers and choreographers who have met at our festivals. That's why I'm doing it, because again, it's still COVID. It's still hard, but we are forging through with the hope.
Definitely. We have to have hope.
Yeah.
Now, a highlight of the fest, before we dive in deeper, I wanted to note Dance Camera West's closing night on January 15th is a centerpiece of the festival, when it presents 6 films made by the recipients of the Finishing Fund for Underrepresented Filmmakers, with a focus on BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, People of Color, which Dance Camera West helped to produce. And the artists will be present that evening. And Dance Camera West 2022 was awarded a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts to help finance a mentorship program for BIPOC artists. And Dance Camera West organized a committee to specifically select films created during LA-based dance festivals, which were forced to go online due to COVID. And each artist was matched with an established BIPOC dance film artist to mentor them. Those recipients of the Finishing Fund for Underrepresented Artists include Lucia Cordova, Marquisa Gardner, Irishia Hubbard, Alyssa Junius, Austin Rich, and Ruru. Ruru-yi, sorry.
It's okay. You know what? I haven't actually met them all in person, so I have never had to say their names out loud either. It's all been through Zoom since this whole thing started. So that's going to be exciting. Meeting them all. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm very proud of this program too. You mentioned earlier that we started that screening committee, which has 30 to 40 younger, hipper, more diverse people than just me and my 2 closest allies. And that, again, is because this art form kind of became a space for women filmmakers when there wasn't space for them in the regular filmmaking world. And also dance is has been very women-dominated, although you couldn't tell by seeing the top companies, which are generally male, led by men. So we recognize the need for access, and having that committee choose these films is one way we do that. They're not selected through one gaze. They're not selected by the middle-aged white woman gaze, which they would be if it was just me, but that is not where we want to be. So we've been working on ways to integrate more artists to make this a more holistic view of the art form. And along the way, I met some really amazing women. When we were applying for the NEA grant, it was before the Black Lives Matter protests, but it was also perfectly timed with that because we were kind of on that road anyway, right? So we were able to write our grant really quickly. We had all the people in place. We knew what we were going to do, and luckily they supported it. Now, this year it is BIPOC artists. It will stay kind of a little more open. You know, one year it might be for women. One year it might be for older people. One year, I don't know, first-time filmmakers. We don't know. But this is what it is right now. And that was because it grew very naturally out of seeing all the LA dance festivals like Black Teenix or the LA Dance Festival Shift last year and Red Cats Now Festival having to go online and kind of thinking, hey, wait, we're ready. Here we are. You want to know how to do that? We know how. So I ended up doing workshops with these festivals, not with the Now Festival, with Black Latinx and the LA Dance Festival, working with the filmmakers. We worked very quickly to have them just get something, make something, so you have a show. And it was great. I love mentoring and talking to dancers and young people and anybody and seeing that little eureka moment, especially on Zoom, because you can really see it, where they go like, oh my gosh, poof, my mind just opened. I have a new idea. So then we took those films, partnered with these women I'd met around through my travels, Cara Hagen, Robin G, and Roma Flowers, and Yolanda, here's where I'm going to mess up the name, Yolanda Guadarrama, who's from Mexico City. We had all met again. I've met most of them in person, but Yolanda and I met on another Zoom symposium that was talking about how are people dealing with not having stages and audiences. So I had those very wise women look at these films by these artists and select the ones that they thought we could help grow. And then we were able to give them an artist fee, which they deserve, to rework the festival. And it wasn't just like, go make a new film, although some did. It was like, listen to this wise person's direction. It takes, because I remember Bob Lockyer from the BBC saying to me, dance is the only art form where someone shows their boyfriend and their mom and then gets on stage. Especially in film, there's a lot of production that goes into it. There are meetings and you have to get this approved and that approved. And we don't want to be part of that world, really, because the beauty of dance film and of dance is it's an expression of self and you just do it your own way. But having an outside eye is never a bad idea. So that's what happened, and we're going to see what comes out of it. I've only seen a couple of the films. They make me cry when I watch them. One of the mentors, Robin G, will be here to sort of host that event and talk about it. And again, I kind of stay out of it. You know what? It's not my job. My job is I have access. I was able to get the money. Here it is. Do your thing. Because if I were in charge of it, that would defeat the entire purpose. So I'm not. They did show me. They're like, well, what do you think? What do you think? Well, I said, they're beautiful. And I cried. That was it.
It's so very exciting. These films.
It's really fun.
I wanted to make note, very fortunately, I was able to see final program from Dance Camera West's Art, Power, and Movimiento and Movimiento. I hope I pronounced that right. But I couldn't take my eyes off the films.
Yeah. They're pretty cool, right?
Yeah, they're exciting. They're cutting edge, impeccable choreography, music, and blocking. The scenery, of course, is beautiful, and I thought really powerful use of both nature and architecture.
Yeah, that's a really good way to describe what dance film can do. Absolutely. It's a little more akin to site-specific work, I think.
Yeah.
Narrative, and creating stories and characters. And the beauty of that, Movimiento is Yolanda's festival in Mexico City. And she has a very specific curatorial voice. Again, I didn't choose those. To me, I'm just like an air traffic controller at this point. I'm trying to get more voices in, not mine. So I keep my mouth shut and say, here, what do you want to show? And work out how to show it and connect people. The films we showed were actually not her favorite. She's pretty hardcore. She wants really political, intense work, speaking specifically about society and culture. And we dialed that a little bit back for our American viewers.
Yeah.
But she's got it in there. You see a point of view, right? You see
definitely.
You see a language and you see a discussion of place and person.
Yeah. And at the same time, you can do two things at once. You can see these discussions, these realities and difficulties you referred to them as. They're universal feelings. But at the same time, they're dynamic and energizing. So we can do this both at once, I believe. Now, can you talk at all about the kinds of discussion or ideas this can open up for viewers?
Yeah. And again, I'm speaking more specifically about what Yolanda's doing, perhaps than what we do in our festival, because our festival, the attempt is to be super eclectic and diverse and show a million different kinds of point of view. Sort of like, you can do this and this and this and this. But as I mentioned, her thing in that program specifically wasn't about just being entertaining. It was about, as I said, translating person and place into an abstract kind of poetic thinking about spaces. I should say the University of San Diego Art Power and Jordan Primer, who's the artistic director, was also looking to open up the conversation with different voices and visions. So they asked us to find a Latin American program because that was the focus of their fall presentation. And I'm like, that's easy. I know this lady.
It all came together perfectly. Yeah.
It did. Yeah. I mean, it was a lot of work. It wasn't super simple. We've watched a lot of films and we could have shown 4 hours worth of films. So usually the work is in editing it down, which again, I didn't really do very well for our next festival in January because we keep adding films.
There's so many.
We have our committee and we're like, oh, but that one's really lovely. And this is an important artist and we should add this one. I'm like, okay, fine. We're just going to midnight.
That really is great. If you're just tuning in, today we are talking to Kelly Hargraves, the Executive and Artistic Director of Dance Camera West. Thank you for listening. This connects to something that we had talked about earlier, visual literacy. Which has been described as a 21st century aptitude. And dance film festivals bring together the highest quality stories to learn from. Visual literacy is defined as the ability to construct meaning from visual images, or what is seen with the eye and what is seen with the mind. It's the ability to decode and interpret visual messages from one system of communication into another, and compose meaningful visual communications. So what does your performance background bring to what you read and see and how you respond to it?
I think a couple of things. I think artists in general, dancers and specifically, see meaning in every little twitch of a finger, a thumb, an ear. Any kind of movement obviously has meaning for a dance maker. Now, sometimes that movie is just, look how great this looks. Look how high my leg can go. Look how I can flip and da-da-da. And that's very exciting and entertaining, right? But then sometimes, and I think this comes out of my arts journalist background too, I'm kind of a professional watcher of dance at this point, and then working within theaters like UCLA Live, which is CAP UCLA now, and Red Cat. You know, I spent a lot of time watching a lot of performance. So, and again, I learned that from my very first day in choreography class with my mentor, favorite person in the world, Elizabeth Langley, who's a choreographer, lives in Montreal, who's from Australia. She's still dancing at 88. And
wow.
Yeah, I know. I can't wait to see her on her 90th birthday. We all met on her 80th. I think we're ready for more. So we just learned that every little space, the space between people, whether someone's standing in front of the person, beside the person, or behind the person, that changes the communication between them, and that changes the relationship that the audience sees. The beauty of making a dance film is sometimes, because it's recorded, you can find those moments because you're looking at yourself dancing and like, oh, look, that moment is meaning. Maybe I didn't know it while I was doing it. Because when you're dancing, you know, honestly, it just feels better. It feels better to dance than to watch dance. So you're in it, right? And sometimes you're maybe so in your own space, you're not looking outside. So sometimes just the camera becomes your outside eye, your director, and that's how I started making it. You know, Elizabeth gave us all cameras. This was in the 80s. We all had our own camcorder and were told to record every single rehearsal we did and find what was working. And then I was like, well, I don't want to put it on stage. Why don't I just take what's great on camera and put it together in a film? So that's sort of how that happened. And that's what's happening now, as I said earlier, because people don't have the audience in the room with them to feel what's working and to engage with and get that kinesthetic thing. You have to create it through camera. And also, when you mentioned visual literacy, I mean, American culture is so dominated by the media rather than live performance. We have a pretty good eye for watching things quickly. Dance comes out of experimental film as well as MTV and music videos. There's a space in like the 90s where they sort of merged. And of course, it's not about the music and the artist as much. It's not about representing them. But the closest I would say is Lemonade. Beyonce's Lemonade is pretty much a dance film.
Yeah.
And she had been making dance films before. She was really influenced, quote unquote, by Anna Teresa de Keersmaker, who's a Belgian choreographer, as well as by an experimental filmmaker named Julie Dash, who made Daughters of the Dust. And you can see those lines directly in Beyonce's work. So she is a really good example of that crossover between dance film, experimental film, and music video. We were like, hello, we've been doing this for 20 years.
Yeah.
But thank you for showing the world, so the world is much more ready for it now. And the saturation of video dance in the last COVID era, which again, to me is a beautiful challenge. It's opened up people's desire to see it, but I still feel like we are not opening up our vision of it's just dancing and we recorded it. We are still looking for works that were conceived to be a cinematic version of a dance. So if you just put a camera on the stage and record what you're doing, I consider that a documentation. And there's some beautiful ones. And it's beautiful to show them when it's an artist that doesn't tour here very much, like Hoffa Schechter we showed last year. And some people can do really beautiful stage adaptations on film. I think we're showing one this year by the British Ballet and a number of other people. But for me, the crux of it all is a cinematic vision that takes filmmaking, editing, and shot blocking and everything and looking for a story within movement and using the movement of film with the movement of dance equally. That's kind of my vibe.
That describes it so well. Now, according to dancefilms.org, it estimates that there are about 17 dance film fests in the U.S. and almost 44 globally. Dance Camera West happens to be among the top on that list of festivals. Dance film is popular in the U.S., which produces nearly half of the dance films worldwide. Why are dance films so popular here? Was the seed that sort of MTV thing and going forward after that you had mentioned?
It's interesting because when I was at NYU and working at Dance on Camera, there weren't any American dance films festivals except that at Lincoln Center. And I remember meeting people at these things. And there have been these dance screen symposiums kind of every decade. And generally people come to them and then go home and start their own damn festival. It's been really fun. And really there were no university courses teaching this back then either. And now there are. There are several schools, including the University of Utah and some others that give a certificate in dance film. But most departments now teach it. If you have a camera, you might want to make it. Now you don't even need a camera. If you have a phone, you have a camera. But it is really fun to watch them pop up all over the place. Now it's going to explode. I mean, there are 3 or 4 festivals just in Los Angeles. So this year, as I said, we're giving this special space to undanced dances. One year we partnered with Dare to Dance because we're called Dance Camera West rather than the Los Angeles Dance Film Festival because we want to be more an umbrella and be a place for people to join. So, every year I reach out to the other pop-up festivals that happen. I'm like, do you want to have part of our weekend? That's fine with me. I want more visions in what we're showing. So if you want a program, let me know. So we did it with Dare to Dance 2 years ago when we were in person at Red Cat. And last year we partnered with the Broad Stage, and so they were able to be part of choosing and programming the films.
Wow. So open.
So open. It's totally open, and that's just kind of how I think.
It's fabulous. It really is. You had also mentioned earlier when we spoke before that you said that you hope it changes the way people dance on stage. And that leads me to 2 women that you mentioned who were groundbreaking leaders of dance and film. First, Pina Bausch and Maya Deren. Mm-hmm. And you shared some very important facts about each woman. First, this is your quote, there is dance and there is theater and then there is Pina Bausch.
Right. And I'll explain that. What I find a lot of times, having watched many performances, is that when some choreographers, dancers, artists decide to do dance theater, right? Because it's a specific art form, grew out of Europe, grew out of German Expressionism, and through Pina Bausch, who's one of the most renowned choreographers in the world, who passed away actually just a couple years ago. And people probably know her work from the film Pina, made by Wim Wenders a few years ago. So some people kind of go like, okay, here's a comparison. So a musical, right, has scenes where people are acting and talking and then they break into song. And A musical film is the same thing, acting, and then Fred Astaire and Ginger Roger have a dinner scene, break into dance.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Pina Bausch was a woman who was able to, and because of her predecessors before her, Mary Vigman, was a woman who was able to put those into one. So you wouldn't have dinner and then dance, you would dance through the dinner. And when you see her work, it's so well integrated. It's just beautiful. It's so exciting. So that's what I mean. And the same with a dance film. You wouldn't just you kind of could actually. I should take this back. Walk down the street and then break into dance.
Yeah.
But it would be kind of the same thing. Like it's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + 1 = 1.
Her films are wild in the best way. I mean, it's just...
The characters she created, the story she created, is just gorgeous.
Yeah. And you said Maya Deren is the mother of avant-garde filmmaking in America.
This is in the 30s, and she was an experimental filmmaker from Russia. She loved dance. She took a lot of classes. After she made her short experimental film, she went to Haiti, and there's lots of films of her dancing and with drum work and things like that. But she had a vision again where she was able to put dance in a real life situation. She has Meshes in the Afternoon, which starts in her Los Angeles home and kind of travels down some stairs. It's kind of like being able to access the surreal. So she was a sort of a surrealist filmmaker, and dance films and dance, I mean, that's what it is. It's taking ordinary things and heightening them with some sort of surreal, magical realism. So, for instance, if you're walking down the street in a narrative feature normal film, you'd be walking down the street. But if you're a dancer, you would never just walk down the street. It would turn into a string of choreography. And Maya was able to do that. And then she had some very interesting things that we've all learned from, where she would start a movement in one space, maybe in a forest, and she would have the dancer raise their leg, and then she would use editing to continue the leg lowering into the man's apartment. And then from there, she would do another cut that made him move into a museum space.
It's amazing.
I still show those films to people. This is where it started, and go wherever you want to go, but watch this because it's still kind of radical. It's still sort of new.
Very much so. I discovered just one piece of information that was interesting about Deren, that she and many of her contemporaries felt that too many filmmakers, particularly commercial filmmakers, relied too heavily on theater or literature, making static films with too much talking instead of taking advantage of cinema's ability to construct and manipulate movement and time. That's just what you were describing right now with her editing, and it's just really fascinating.
Yeah, and deconstruct. My first film was called Dis, and it was all about breaking down movement so that there wasn't one straightforward shot of any kind of movement. It was cut all over the place. It was all in a million different places. In fact, now that I'm saying it out loud, it was very influenced by Maya Deren, which I guess I didn't consciously tell myself back then. It's crazy. It was shot in like 4 different cities and running through train stations in Detroit, jumping into snowbanks in New York, lying in a lake in Canada. I considered it all one string of movement. And obviously I got that directly from Madame Dara. She relied on the body as a way of telling information rather than writing a script. So most dance films may have a shooting script or a shot list so you can follow something through. Regular filmmaking, commercial filmmaking, is usually based on a conversation. So it'll be a shot of one person talking to another person. Then the camera will flip its point of view so you see the other person replying. And generally in theater and film, the whole thing is there's a conflict that has to be resolved, right? Like, you stole my boyfriend, or you stole money, or you murdered somebody. And dance doesn't necessarily need that. It just goes through the flow of the emotions and the internal world that happens in that story, as do dance films.
Exactly.
There's not an A + B = C.
Yeah. You mentioned that dance films are made equally between men and women, literally almost like 50-50.
Did that happen this year? Did I say that? That's great. Yeah, because as I said, women sort of explored dance film when they weren't really making traditional films very much. And that's changing year by year as we move through and become a little more aware. But yeah, it is fun when it's both.
Definitely.
Sometimes what happens, I notice though, when in in the submissions, the men come from a filmmaking background and then they partner with a choreographer. No, and I shouldn't be so cut and dry about that. It's changing. I don't even know. Years ago, I could have said like the women were the choreographers, the men were the filmmakers. And now it's changing as more and more films are made by women and more women become editors and DOPs and directors. So that's cool.
Yeah, definitely.
It's time.
There'll be a lot more exciting films to see for sure.
Yeah.
So why is dance film important?
Well, now it's really important because nobody can go see dance otherwise. It's also really important because it just brings voices from around the world to places where the dancers may not be able to travel. It doesn't have the big budget that's needed to have a company or a tour. Dance is the most expensive art form to make. You got to pay bodies to be in a studio that you have to pay for. And it takes a long time to really craft a work. So bringing dancers, a lot of dance companies sometimes have, not a lot, but the big companies have 30 or 40 people. So that's different than a play that might have 4 people on stage. I think right now it's personally important to people, as I said, because they just need to work. They need to keep creating and showing their work. You know how Zoom kept us all sane because we can have meetings? Like dance film is keeping performers performing, I think.
Yeah, and it's also keeping us sane too, I would say.
Hopefully. Not me. Talk to me in February. We'll see.
Yeah. When you recover from all
When
of
I
this.
recover, exactly.
Now, for Dance Camera West, you mentioned that you accomplished several things. First, you created more categories this year. Mm-hmm. Usually there's 3 or 4, but this year there's 8. What are those 8 categories?
That's a good question. And the answer to that is that's a good question because I'm not being specific. It's not just best of. I'm trying to find a way to expand that as well. It might be best first-time filmmaker. It might be best stage adaptation. It might be best senior filmmaker. I'm sort of I took the films that were the top scored and I'm putting them sort of on a separate page and seeing what ties them together or what makes them best. It's a little subjective, I suppose. It's not just best of. But I will say there will be several outstanding achievement awards, which we started last year when we had a few filmmakers who made more than one film, which is pretty outstanding achievement in 1 year. And this year we have a few more. And I'm super happy that some of them are Los Angeles people who have been working for decades and maybe haven't been recognized here. So there will be a couple of those. I can't tell you who because they don't know yet. It will all be a surprise. And then we will choose a couple of submissions from the BIPOC artists in order to give a grant next year as well.
Wow.
We started the grant before the NEA money came. We did it the year before, and then we got the NEA money. We did 2 artists. So Marquesa Gardner and Austin Rich were actually the 2021 winners, and they were given a year to do these films. And then the NEA people were only given like 3 months.
Oh, wow.
But again, they had already started because they had already weren't performing. So they'd already gone that route. And that will be the same next year. We'll choose a couple, probably not as many unless we get more funding. But this is the same with the categories. First of all, there will be a best first-time filmmaker. There will be outstanding achievement. And then there will be, best of, most beautiful film or whatever. Best documentary. They'll be a little bit more conventional.
Well, it sounds very inclusive again.
That is all I care about right now. I feel like I'm kind of been doing this a long time, and my goal is to say, you know what, this is what I can help you with. Now it's your turn.
Yeah. And then you also mentioned that you said part of coming back to Dance Camera West was not wanting to do what other festivals do, but to keep this very esteemed festival's brand up. Yeah,
I decided we needed to pay people. And that's a Canadian thing because in Canada you have to pay people. It's not a lot of money, but you basically can earn back your entry fee and you become part of our touring program. For instance, we do things with UC San Diego or with any other institution, you get paid that way. And then the other thing that was important was opening up distribution streams. Because of my day job working in film distribution, I have relationships with people who run those companies like Ovid.tv and All Arts. And finding a place where these films live online throughout the year, so they're not just up for the 1 week or the 2 week of each festival. So on Ovid TV, we put up the selection from every festival. So it's going to become a pretty comprehensive site for dance films. Because again, I started all this when I was studying and couldn't find any films, Yeah. And I was thinking, like, first of all, they have educational possibilities. Every university, every dance teacher should be watching these. And second of all, they have entertainment value. So we created DVDs back in the day, but now everything's going to be streaming. So Ovid already had dance films, mostly documentaries, and we've added the shorts and experimental. There must be over 100, 200 films there, and there will be these 75 added to it.
It's a fabulous site.
Isn't it great?
It is. I encourage everybody.
Another collaboration between 8 different distribution companies to put it all in place.
That's great.
Yeah, I'm happy about that.
And you mentioned you're doing more mentoring and teaching.
Yeah.
And by doing this, you're also keeping your hand in it.
Yeah, that has been fun. I've been asked by people around the world, in Korea or the Philippines, and another woman in New York. They're starting film festivals because they hadn't had to before as performance places. So I had a hand in helping the Fifth Wall Festival in the Philippines, in Manila. Great, smart young women doing great work, so organized. I'm like, I can definitely learn from these women. Seoul, Korea is called SIDFIT. It's usually an in-person event. It's Seoul International Dance Festival in Tank, which is a venue. And I was invited to kind of speak to those choreographers about how to translate the word to stage. Although I have to say, many of the films we have this year are from Korea, and they're really good, so they didn't really need me. They know what they're doing. Wow. And the one that just ended like yesterday, was called Black Lives Rising in New York by Joey Lorraine. And she was just kind of like, I'm just going to start a festival. I'm like, well, I can help you. I allow these festivals to look at our submissions and then obviously involve the filmmakers that they want to see. So some of our filmmakers were able to be in 3 or 4 festivals just by entering ours. Wow. Because a lot of film festivals are expensive, including mine. So if I can help people build programs and get the filmmakers seen around the world just by pushing a few email buttons, I will happily do that.
That's great. What a great Christmas present, huh?
I know. Seriously. Hey, I'm like, why am I not marketing this as buy your dance-loving friend a festival pass? It's only $100 to see 75 films, 2 weekends, and there's wine and cheese and dancing and parties at all of it. So
that's a deal. That's
right?
A deal.
Yeah. And then after being invited by all of those places, I just sort of set up my own mentoring thing on a Saturday afternoon. Well, the first session of it was how-to, kind of, for people who'd never done it. And then the second was just people who wanted to come back and show their work and have a discussion about it rather than working in isolation for so long. And we're showing some of those films, so it was really fun to see how we helped people sharpen their voice or sharpen their skills. And a lot of those people who took those classes are on the screening committee, too, because, now they've had kind of an intro to watching.
A lot of opportunity there.
Young people are so cute. I really, really enjoy it. Totally.
Yeah. So you said that that's what a dance film fest should do. Just bringing together these diverse voices.
That's why things like Sundance and Tribeca and New York Film Festival are such a big deal. And the one in Toronto International Film Festival, TIFF. Filmmakers, artists kind of work in isolation, spend a lot of time staring at screens. So being in a space, meeting people, learning about other people's cultures, learning about other people's art form. As I say, collaborations come out of it. The mentors I've met at workshops and festivals around the world. So we were like a little tribe before, there were just maybe 50 people who were at every festival you'd go to in Europe or Madison, Wisconsin. And now it's a much bigger community. And this year it's much more local. We made sure that there are local artists on every night. So hopefully there'll be a pretty big group of friends and family at least every night, and then they'll see everybody else's work. Because they're shorts. It's different than when you go to see your friend's performance, and it's going to be the same 50 people, whether they're performing in Santa Monica or downtown or wherever.
Mm-hmm.
this is mixed programs, so there's a lot of people. And we don't tell you what order the films are in, so you can't just see your friends and walk out.
Be on the edge of your seat.
It's
all very exciting. It is a lot.
We added intermissions because we're like, this could get exhausting. There's a bagel shop across the street. You can camp out. There's a bar. There'll be music. There's a lounge. You just kind of walk in and out. And then we've sort of asked a few of the people whose films were based on a performance, not a stage performance, but there's a visual artist, a street artist actually named Ink, who does these amazing live sketches of this woman named Linda dancing. So they're going to do a demonstration of that. And then there's another filmmaker from the film Dance With Me, which I don't want to tell anybody about because it's so beautiful to just see what it is. He will do a little segment of that live. And then there's another artist named Nathan Herscott. He's just super dynamic, and he does these workshop dances, and he's going to do that throughout the day on Saturday. So it's not like putting performance beside film. I don't think that's helpful to either form, but there's sort of more interactive, involving the audience in the movement.
Pulling it all together.
Yeah.
Well, it's very eclectic. What is the website that people can go to?
So easiest right now is just go to dancecameraWest.org. We have a little tab that's called Festivals, and under that it shows the program for each venue. So it's January 6 to 8 at Théâtre Raymond Cabaz, and then January 13 to 15 at 2220 Arts and Archives. You will be able to link to each venue to purchase tickets and to see more details about the programs. I keep tweaking it to hope that I'm organizing it in a very easy to follow manner, but it's a lot of info.
It's all very straightforward. And
oh, good.
as I mentioned, it will be on our show notes too. So anybody who wants to check it out, go there, please. You will be quite thrilled with the whole event. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Is there a possibility of a drive-in event?
Oh, okay. So because life sucks right now because of COVID, we are on our toes and ready to pivot, as everybody's had to. And of course, dancers are always on their toes and ready to pivot. So we're totally ready to change it if we have to. Last year we did the drive-in because we had to change it. So we know how. We also know how to do a completely online virtual program because we've done that for a few years already. Right now we're holding tight to the idea that we will be in person. No decisions have been made, but if they have to be made, we're ready. There's plan B and there's plan C.
Always prepared.
Yeah.
That's great.
Like a Girl Scout I am.
That's great. We'll cross our fingers.
Yeah.
Well, Kelly Hargraves, thank you so much for sharing Dance Camera West.
No, thank you so much for letting me. It's a pleasure to speak to you and be on your program.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and recommend on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.